Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 59. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank everyone who subscribes to the show, continues to like, support, and share. Your support allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guests today. I also want to thank our sponsors. Samson Equipment has been providing uncompromising quality for over 40 years. Samson products are long-lasting and made of the highest quality equipment on the market. Each project is built from the ground up with the ability to customize every need. The team at Samson focuses on developing the highest quality relationships with their customers, in addition to providing them unparalleled quality in every piece of equipment bearing the Samson name. Learn more about Samson's professional weight room solutions and the Samson standard at samsonequipment.com. Also want to thank our sponsors, Cerberus Strength. If you're in the market for the highest quality strength and conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to check out cerberusstrength.com and use promo code strength_game to receive 10% off your next order. And in this week's episode, I am joined by Angelo Gingerelli. Angelo has been a strength coach at Seton Hall since 2005 and oversees all aspects of training and conditioning for the Olympic sports. Prior to arriving at Seton Hall, he spent the 2005 season with the Pittsburgh Pirates organization and was an assistant strength coach at NC State from 2001 to 2005. He began his coaching career as a graduate assistant strength coach at Virginia Tech University. In addition to his coaching duties, Gingerelli is an adjunct professor for several graduate and undergraduate level courses at Seton Hall. He is a published author with a number of articles, as well as co-author of the book, Finish Strong, Resistance Training for Endurance Athletes. Most recently, he was named the New Jersey State Director of the NSCA. Angelo first started in the coaching profession as most do strength training. He competed for multiple years in both powerlifting and then Olympic weightlifting before completely shifting focus in 2010 to road racing and soon after marathons, competing in his first one the following year. Since then, he spent more than a decade exploring the benefits of strength training for endurance sports with his athletes, as well as applying the principles in his own training. I'm excited to have him on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Angelo Gingerelli. How's it going, everybody? Today, I'm excited. I am joined by Coach Angelo Gingerelli. How's it going today, Coach?
Great, man. Thanks for having the show, Nick. I super appreciate it.
Hey, I appreciate you. We kind of talked briefly before the show, but we didn't want to get too into the weeds and miss out on actually recording it and sharing with other people. But yeah, this profession is huge. You've been in it for quite some time. I'm trying to catch up in some ways, and we talked about networking, and it's crazy to think that we've been in similar areas. We've known a lot of people, but to finally get to be able to talk to someone like this and reach out to each other, I think I'm excited to have you on.
Yeah, man, I listen to the show. I really like it. I'm a fan of the format. You've had some great guests before, so I'm just hopefully, be one of the, better guests you've had, hopefully.
Well, I appreciate it, you listening, and I think you will be, and I'm undoubtedly excited to hear more about kind of your journey and the things you got going on. So, hey, with all that said, like I really want to start into kind of the backstory of how you got into coaching and training, because it's pretty long. So really, what did you do to kind of get involved in sports training and then ultimately shift gears to basically be involved in endurance sports now heavily?
Yeah, man. So I started off, I was in high school in the 90s and at the Jersey Shore, right? And I was in a public high school, and I really just hit the lottery as far as our profession goes. And I went to a public high school that had for the time, very good weight room. Now, if you look at it now, it's obviously been outdated, but for 1996 standards, a good high school weight room, right? And I had a great high school strength coach named Ron DeVito. And I met him my freshman year, and I got really into training and I wanted to be bigger, stronger, I wanted to be better, baseball, wrestling, track, the sports we all kind of grow up playing. And by my junior, senior year, I just liked the weight room more than any of the sports I was doing, and decided I wanted to make some part of that in my life long term, right? The weight room helped me a lot. I made my best friend in there, had one of my early mentors in life in Coach DeVito, and I wanted to try to, extend that good experience for the rest of my life and help other people have a similar experience in their development. And just do another kind of stroke of luck, my senior year in high school, the University of Delaware was starting a program. It was an exercise science major with a concentration in strength and conditioning. It was at the time the first program in the country to do that. So I was able to apply, get in, and go through that program. My graduating class was, I believe, was the first class at the University of Delaware to have that strength and conditioning on our diploma. And even today, there's more than that, but there's not too many more than that doing that as an actual major, right? So I got down to Delaware. Part of my major was interning with Tony Decker, the strength coach there. Another big influence on my life and my career. And then the last thing I had to do at Delaware to finish my degree was an internship, basically, the typical 10-week, 400-hour jump into a career type internship. And I did that down at North Carolina State. So I got to work with Charles Stevenson down there with predominantly basketball. I did some stuff with the football program, and just really was super lucky to be involved in an ACC school literally like 72 hours after I was done with college, and see how that works, trying to see how the next level works. And then right as that ended, I got a graduate assistantship job at Virginia Tech. Really a couple fun years to be down there. Our football team was really good. We played for the national championship game against Florida State and lost my first year. Second year, we played in the Gator Bowl against Clemson. And then right after that was over, again, kind of lucky, a full-time job opened up at NC State. Same people in charge of hiring that one, but the people I was working during the internship, and I got that job at NC State. Couple really good baseball players came through NC State when I was there. Team did really well. That led to a position with the Pittsburgh Pirates for one season. Great experience. I know you've had some minor league baseball guys on here too, and I liked it. I made a lot of good friends there, learned a lot, but I thought the college thing was a little more my speed. And after that season, the Seton Hall job opened up, and I grew up a Seton Hall fan. I had a Seton Hall starter jacket in high school. The 89 championship game was my first memory of college basketball. My family lives in North Jersey and the Jersey Shore. I like being near New York, and that was 2005, and I've been here ever since. So again, I kind of did what most strength coaches do. I moved around a lot those first couple of years out of college, and then for the last 17 years, I've been in one place. I think one thing our profession doesn't do well is pay us well. A lot of people said on your show, and I think a lot of our jobs and a lot of our career is kind of chasing that next bigger position, bigger check, bigger title. And I think there's definitely something at times where you should definitely do that, right? But I think one thing I kind of figured out is if you stay in one position for a little bit longer period of time, you can open some doors for yourself professionally and income-wise that you can't if you move around a lot, right? So by being here for as long as I have, I'm an adjunct professor and teach several classes every year, which number one, I really enjoy doing, and number two, adds to my check every month. And then I've been able to write a book. I have great relationships with different labs and different places on campus. And I just really kind of settled in here, and I'd like to work here for a little while longer if they're as into it as I am. But I think in our job, people come and go so much. We talk about buy-in. I've been here longer than most of our head coaches at this point, right? So one thing the players know I'm here. I'm like the paint on the wall. If you come in the weight room, you go see Angelo, he's got your back. He's doing what's best for you. And I don't know everything, but I think one thing with buy-in is they kind of know I'm not jumping out the window at the next opportunity, and I'm going to probably be there for all 4 years there on campus.
No, that's awesome. That's definitely one thing that a lot of people can't say in this profession. And I mean, to your credit, like to stay in one place, obviously it's awesome. I mean, there's a good amount of luck that comes in this profession for, like, obviously Seton Hall to kind of open up and that be like your hometown team essentially that you really wanted to be a part of. But most people don't get in that opportunity because they don't set themselves up for it. But it's cool to see what happens when you do stay in a place for a long time. And we were talking before, like my last stop at Fresno State, it was just under 5 years, but that's the longest I've ever lived in one place in my entire life. Obviously, like it's different for other people because I'm a military brat. My dad's still active duty, but to see college coaches that ticker is just a year, 2 years, 1 year.
Yeah, I think there's some people will look at that and blame a strength coach. Why are you guys always looking for the next thing? Why don't you just stay where you are and be happy? What they don't understand is a lot of people are being told to stay in one place and be happy when they're making $25,000 a year with no benefits and working from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. 6-7 days a week, right? In my opinion, is if you want to have a family and own a house and live the quote unquote American dream, a lot of strength coaching jobs are not going to allow you to do that, right? So the only answer is move on from job to job so you get something where you can have a decent standard of living, right? Or stay where you are and open a bunch of other doors for yourself that will lead to some income and some opportunities that you can have if you stay in one place and become kind of a pillar of that community. But the idea of just staying in one of those, unfortunately, there's way too many of them, kind of low paying, no benefit strength jobs for a long period of time. I think it's unfair to ask young coaches that, number one, have definitely a bachelor's degree, probably a master's degree, possibly a PhD, that are maybe still paying for their loans back to stay in those positions for a long period of time. Is that fair? You think, you know what I'm saying?
No, I completely agree. I obviously, like, I'm still kind of in that position, and the same as you said about your players, like, they know that the one consistent thing about Seton Hall and like the athletic department is you, like, you're going to be there. But yeah, it's kind of a revolving door. And when you're around even just strength coaches or the athletic department in general, everybody kind of knows that there's like invisible clock above someone's head, like when it's going to tick, and then eventually that person's going to be out. And unfortunately, it falls on like the athletes, who a lot of times go to a place based off a coach. But it's unfair to have a strength coach, especially, or athletic trainer, any support staff that we know are pretty much the ones that are going to be hitting with the biggest burden because of financial reasons and salary. But yeah, the bar and standard to actually break into the profession is so high that we kind of have to think and hope and hold on to some glimmer that the grass is a little bit greener, or you start setting up a situation that's better. And for me, like, when I took this position, there was a lot of other factors that came into it, but I definitely took a pay cut to come back here. But it checked boxes in other ways, and it improved like a lot of different aspects of my life. And I think that for young coaches, you kind of grind and chase for a little bit until you maybe your priorities shift. But like, for young coaches out there, like, when they're kind of considering a job, since we're still like talking about like career advancement and things like that, what are some other things that they should look for when posing or sending out applications, rather than, because I remember one year I sent 164 out and I wanted anything. I would take it. I would go to Alaska. I would go anywhere. But what should they kind of consider a little bit more, so they're not maybe bouncing around as often?
And I think a couple of things. One thing that I've done at this stage of my career, which I think will help for other listeners to your show, I use the app GroupMe, and I keep all of my interns in this one GroupMe. So it's 50 plus people at this point. They're all in the profession, right? And what that's done is it kept me in touch with kids that interned me 10, 12 years ago to, this past semester. And if I see a job opening, I'll put it in there. If they see a job opening, they'll put it in there. Somebody published an article, that'll go in there. I just heard this podcast, listen to it. And it's been a really cool thing. It's keeping us all in touch and keeping that network going, right? I think networking is super important, and not go up, introduce yourself at a conference, give someone your business card and never talk to them again, but actually try to be friends with people and have them alert you to things and actually recommending you for things when they come up, right? And that's part of networking is super important. Number two, when I was getting into with that GroupMe thing, last summer, one of the kids in there put in a GroupMe, I'm thinking about applying for a job. Can I use you as a reference? And I put this up in the group so everybody can see, because I really, number one, if you're in this group with me, you can always use me as a reference, right? I wouldn't invite you to join it if you didn't. Number two, if you're thinking about applying for a job and haven't done it yet, it's probably already too late. You're going to apply to jobs in our profession as soon as you see them. I see you laughing, but tell me I'm wrong about that. We have a position open at Seton Hall every couple of years, and it's not even a great job, to keep it real. We get 100 applications in the first couple of hours. It's posted online, right? So if you're going to have any shot at one of these jobs, you got to be the first day, if not the first couple hours, because once it's 3 or 4 days and they're like 200 resumes deep, the odds of you being the needle in the haystack that sticks out are pretty low, right? So I think apply to things early. In my opinion, if you're a younger coach, apply to everything. If you get an interview and you don't get the job, you got experience doing interviews, right? If you get an offer and it's not going to work out, we'll turn it down and go do something else. But the idea of not putting yourself in having a chance at every job you see, I think is probably a wrong thing, right?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I say to get a job in college is incredibly hard. And one thing I think I've heard you ask other guests about this, but they could go back in their life and change some things. the one thing I had from day one was blinders on of I want to work in college athletics, right? And that worked out incredibly well for me, as you heard during my bio, right? I kind of hit the lottery in that. But early on, I wish maybe I had some other ideas of things I could have done related to strength and conditioning that just never crossed my mind, right? Stuff like, in the world we live in now, there's more lanes that are technically in the strength and conditioning umbrella than ever before. Like, maybe if you don't like college, maybe you like professional baseball. Maybe you get a high school job and that's the best job you ever had. Maybe it's on the equipping and developing of force plates and technology and motion sensors and stuff like that you can see if you're in the biomechanics side of it. Like, I've been a sneaker guy my whole life, but if you look at what goes into working for a company like Adidas or Nike or Under Armour, that might be something that applies to you making the next great weightlifting shoe. And I just didn't, those things never crossed my mind. And I always say, if you're hell-bent on just doing one thing in our profession, it might not work out. So have some other doors you're ready to open if they do open. You know what I mean?
No, I completely agree. I mean, it's kind of, since the profession's starting to advance, obviously there's still not strength coaches in every high school or every, even like some of the colleges too. Like I talked with my buddy the other day, and I mean, he's at a Division II school, and he knows he competes in conferences where they have football programs and they only still have one full-time coach on staff. And I mean, even my like alma mater is a D3 school, and it's a powerhouse like Salisbury University. And still to this day, it's one full-time strength coach and 3 GAs running national championship teams and programs.
Number one, that's amazing. Number two, I think it's a credit to Matt Nine and that he could do that good of a job when he's there, right? And I follow him on social media. One thing he always does impress me, and I think guys like you are a credit to him and his program, when he puts stuff on social media that the team needs a squat rack to make donations, right? Or we're rebuilding the weight room, we're having this alumni day. So many of his alumni seem like just ride or die, love what he does, love the experience they have with him, and want to give back to the program. I think that's phenomenal. I think in college athletics, we need to do more stuff like that. I think the strength coach should be involved a little bit more, right? By the time a kid graduates Seton Hall, I spend more time with them than almost anybody else on campus, right? And I think we're going to reach out to these kids to give back and come to alumni stuff. And I feel like one thing my job to someone is to obviously maximize their athletic potential, minimize injuries, but I want to be a part of them having a great college experience, right? So I'm at the time of the year right now, our semester's winding up. I get a ton of emails, cards, written notes. We had our end of the year banquet last night, so I talked to a lot of kids and their families at the end of the night. And what I want to hear is, I had a great 4 years and you were a big part of it. And if I get a couple of those conversations or cards at the end of the year, I feel like that was a good year. Maybe it's getting a little bit older, but sometimes I value that more than a Big East championship or a ring or whatever it might be. And then the biggest thing I think is you see them a couple of years out in an alumni event or a basketball game for us, and they tell you like, yeah, I'm still training all the time. I still do my squats, my lunges, whatever. And I just bought a house, or they introduced me to their kids and their wife. And like, oh, this is the strength coach I told you about. And I think we have such a unique opportunity to get to know these kids and be a part of their life. But it's got to be more than the weight room, man. So many of their head coaches are they become numbers, right? You're not Joe, you're 18 points and 6 rebounds a game, right? And as soon as you're hurt and can't do your stats, a lot of head coaches check out of being your friend. Fair enough. But my thing is, I want you to be Joe that's a chemistry major and applying to grad school, and I talk to your mom and dad when they come to the game. And that's how you have a real relationship with people. So kind of going back to breaking the field, you got to try to have a real relationship with everybody you work with. And then the biggest thing is, learn from as many coaches and sources as you can. I deal with a lot of young coaches that have a philosophy already, or they come from the CrossFit world or the powerlifting world or the Olympic lifting world. And I think that's great. Have some things you think work, but also be open to so many other things, because there's so many ways to skin this cat. And if you know, the only absolute I feel for young coaches is you got to know your anatomy and physiology, know your energy metabolism, know the way the human body works, right? But also know there's 100 different ways to make the human body better. And you got to be able to have the biggest toolbox you can and implement everything you have to make it work. The example I always give is, I have an intern that comes to see, we have an 8,000 square foot weight room. We have 8 power rack combos. We got a great dumbbell section, med balls, all this stuff, right? That's your internship experience. If your first job is at a public high school and all you have is a couple of bent bars, 2 mismatched dumbbells, and some metal plyo boxes and a concrete floor, how are you training those kids? Because that might be your first job, and you got to be able to do it without a wood weight treadmill, and without a power lift rack, and without the good kind of med balls, right?
Oh, exactly. I think that having those different experiences though gives you kind of the perspective now that you have. Like you would definitely be in a different position if you started your career and you stayed at Seton Hall forever. I mean, you're pretty open-minded where you're going to go out and reach out to other people and bring stuff in, but it doesn't take away, it's not the same value as going and immersing yourself in a place for a semester. And I think the cool thing you talked about, like we talked about with coaches bouncing around as often as they get, you said yourself, like conference championships, like national championships, things where like athletes are being athletes and like their success with a team and stuff is great. But being in a career long enough where you start seeing athletes come back and tell you about life achievements, like family things and having kids and stuff like that, you don't get that a lot of times when you bounce around, because they come back. A lot of times kids go to their, like you did, you dreamed about being at Seton Hall. Some players like dream about going to Seton Hall to play. So if they're really tied to that school and you leave that school, you never really get the opportunity to see what happens, like the fruits of your labor, when you sow that seed like 10 years down the line, when it's a huge payoff, something like that.
Yeah, definitely. So there's definitely a value to being in one place at one time. And it's a cliche, but it's really about relationships, trying to be a mentor to some of these kids. I always say we have this weird thing in our profession where everybody wants to be and everybody looks up to professional sports strength coaches, right? So in my area, I say the Jets and the Giants. So like the main guys in the area. And then the next step down, the way people view is people like me at Seton Hall or Rutgers or Princeton, right? Then they view the high school coaches kind of below us. And then they view like the middle school and elementary school health and phys ed teachers at the bottom. If you really think about who has an impact on an athlete's life, it's the complete opposite, right? Like my daughter's about to be 7. She's playing youth sports now. And I promise you the coaches she's having now are having a bigger impact on her life than I'm having on my 18 and 22-year-olds, right? And I'm having a bigger impact on my guys than I'm going to guess the Jets, Giants, Knicks, Brooklyn Nets coaches are having on theirs, so they're fully formed adults, right? We have this weird thing where everybody, I understand the money and benefits are better the higher up you go as far as the level of athlete you train. But as far as the esteem people hold people in, I think the younger level you're working with to some extent deserves more respect and more props because of the impact they're able to have on those young athletes' lives, more than I can at the college level.
Yeah, I completely agree. So kind of touching on staying like in a place kind of for the long haul or for a longer duration, which unfortunately, if you're looking at lifespan for like strength coaches at a place, it's probably like average 3 years. And
That's
then you kind of move on. So like talk about your time starting. You've been at Seton Hall for 17 years now. How did you start utilizing the resources, or what was kind of your first step in utilizing the resources around you and then kind of bolstering what you were able to do, like leading into teaching, leading into like the book and what I want to touch on later, but like writing and stuff like that, some of the things that are outside of coaching, how were you able to add those in and still balance what you were doing with the resources you had?
Perfect. So the first thing that we had that I had access to at Seton Hall right away was we have a graduate level athletic training program and a graduate level PT physical therapy program, right? And I got to be friends with a lot of those professors very early on. They asked me to guest lecture in their classes pretty early. Eventually, I was doing some lab tech stuff with them and kind of being a lab instructor, and we just hit it off right away. And one of those coaches I worked with was RJ Borges, my co-author on the book. He was one of the few guys on campus that liked to run and he liked to lift. So we'd go for runs after work. Some days we'd lift after work some days. And that whole idea, that's the whole idea of the book. Like there's resistance training, there's endurance training. Too much of a profession separates the two, when in reality, endurance athletes can definitely benefit from some kind of resistance training and some kind of muscular strength development, right? But immediately what that did is opening up to being able to go in the biomechanics lab and bring maybe a baseball player that's struggling into the biomechanics lab and use some high speed cameras and break down what he was doing without having to buy him out of my own budget or contract someone out of my own budget to use him, right? I think when you're going to, even at a very, Seton Hall's not a huge college. We're a small college. We're very lucky to have just opened a medical school a couple miles away that has some amazing labs and stuff like that. But even if you're at a small college, I think too much of what happens in the weight room and the athletic department in general happens in a bubble, right? So what I did right away, I did a couple of things. One, I started a MBA in sports management right away when I got there. So that immediately put me in touch with all the people in the business school and all the adjunct professors and all the people that are in the business school right away. And then I started adjunct teaching and guest lecturing in our athletic training program, which put me in touch almost daily with everybody there on the science side of things, right? So immediately I'm opened up to 2 different places on campus that just wouldn't be open to a strength coach before. And now I'm able to say, if we're looking to do a project to sell more tickets to a game, or if we're doing a marketing campaign, can we bring in some business school kids, have them intern and help us out with that, right? If kids want to be involved in PR in that major, can we bring them over and help them give out posters or promote something on social media, whatever it is? I kind of work with them as best I can. On the science side of things, we don't have a metabolic car in the athletic department, but if we want to get a VO2 max on a cross country kid, I call RJ and we set up a time, we make it happen. Which I think so many strength coaches spend their time in the bubble of the weight room. And part is the hours we work and the amount of, we spend 12, 13 hours a day in a windowless basement that nobody knows we're there besides the players that come and see us every day. But I think if you want to, and the way our president now, technology being such a massive part of it, and it's an expensive part of it to keep it real. If your AD is not going to buy you that kind of stuff, maybe someone's already using it on campus and you start using it that way. You know what I mean? And that being said, the people I always say, you got to be closer to your strength coach. Find the guy in charge of meals, make him your friend, right? You're not going to go hungry. Find the equipment manager, make him your friend, get t-shirts and hoodies for everybody in your family. And number 3, find the photographer and make him or her your friend, because you've set a photographer and make you look real silly on the website.
There you go. That's great advice. Actually, those are, I would add on to this one's a weird one, but custodian.
Oh, no doubt. No question, man. Somebody throws up in the weight room, you got to make them your friend real quick.
That honestly, at Fresno State, that was one of my favorite guys to talk to. We would shoot the shit in the morning and talk like before wrestling would come in, if something would happen. I gave that guy t-shirts all the time. He was awesome to talk to. It was the one person, like the last day I was leaving, I was like, I have to find him. And I tracked him down, talking to him every single day. That's great advice.
Well, you know what happened to strength coaches, man? This is an interesting idea real quick. My guys and my girls in this building, it's housekeeping, it's our HVAC guys, it's our plumbers. And here's why. They come to work early, right? There's a lot of times I'm opening the weight room, they're the only guys and girls working. The ADs ain't here. The coaches ain't here, right? It's me, the athletic trainer, and those physical plant, those union guys and girls that are working and making our world go, and they become your friends, right? And we had a real bad flood in the weight room, right? September of 2021. So the room was open. My office was incredibly damp. It was disgusting. I wouldn't eat lunch in there, right? So I would come in and do our early morning teams. Then I go eat like a 9 o'clock snack when I had a break in the car, because there's no place I could eat, right? So I'm in my car eating at 9 o'clock. All the ADs, all the head coaches, all the people that are the quote unquote important people are showing up to work at 9. And they're saying, good morning. Like, good morning. I'm eating lunch. I've been here 3-4 hours already. What are you talking about? Good morning. Like, oh, we didn't know you did that. I'm like, well, I don't know if you came to work before 9, you might be able to figure it out. But that's kind of the world we live in, man. We're doing a ton of the work and getting paid the least a lot of times. And this past year, because of that flood, became super eye-opening to me that, like, it's not a really normal thing for an adult to be eating their quote-unquote lunch at 9:30 because they've been up since 4. You know what I mean?
Exactly. No, that support staff for the support staff, like that are behind closed doors, just kind of like we are behind the teams and the athletes. That's a huge part of like what it makes an athletic department run. And it's this, I mean, the same as us. I think it's definitely underappreciated, and knowing, being someone that feels underappreciated, like as the department and like the position and just the role in general, I definitely don't want them to feel that same way. So, hey, kind of spinning it a little bit. We touched on it a little bit briefly. Obviously, we kind of went over your coaching career and everything, but intertwined with that was your athletic experience. And you competed in powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting, and then took kind of a break after that, and then really shifted gears into endurance training, leading into like some of the stuff that you've been talking about now, setting up, being an author and writing your book, Finish Strong, along with your co-author at Seton Hall. So can you give a brief overview, like can you first kind of touch on your competitive experience in training, and then kind of what the rationale, what the reason was to really write the book?
Cool. Great, man. I started off my high school had a powerlifting team, right? So if you weren't playing a sport that season, you could lift in the weight room and go to powerlifting meets. And I did that through high school, kind of after high school for a couple of years into college. It was a good experience. I know a lot of people in our profession kind of frown on powerlifting. I personally had a great experience. I didn't get injured. I made great friends. I put up some decent numbers. I wasn't world class or anything, but I was decent for a high school, teenage, early 20s with powerlifting in New Jersey. And then I kind of segued into that during grad school, got really into Olympic lifting through the USAW certifications and competed in that for a couple of years, liked it, had a good time, and then got so wrapped up in my career. I got trained, obviously, but I put competitive stuff to the side. And then in like 2009 or 10, I was writing for a magazine called Fit in New Jersey. And the whole staff of the magazine ran a 10-mile race in Philadelphia. So it was kind of a fun day out. We weren't, pushing it real hard. Just kind of had a good little staff outing. And I really liked it. I was like, this is kind of fun. Let me try to run a half marathon. Then I ran a marathon in the next year, 2011, and just got super into it, man. And right about that same time, I started working out with Dr. Borgers, and that kind of led into the book. Because like I said earlier, we are at the time, 10 years ago, nobody we knew was lifting and running. They were two different worlds. So the idea was like, we're kind of, as 2010s wore on, we're like, well, we're still running, we're competing, we're getting faster as we're getting older, right? And we're not getting hurt like so many of our peers are. Maybe resistance training is the missing piece of the puzzle for a lot of people we work out with. So we decided to kind of put our ideas down, write a proposal, pitch it to a bunch of different publishers, and then got a deal and published a book in 2021. It could have been out a year earlier. COVID slowed us down, obviously, a lot of factories being closed and stuff like that. But it was a 3-year process overall. As far as becoming an author, the one thing I would say is the year before that, so 2018 or 17, I pitched a book to 5 publishers a week for the entire year. So 250 publishers, almost no interest whatsoever in what I was trying to pitch, right? But what I did is I saved every contact person, every publisher I had in this huge Excel sheet. So the next year, me and Dr. Borgers got the idea, and then I just started pitching the same people, just a new proposal, right? And I think that's one thing you should do if you're trying to get in this publishing game a little bit. Keep the contacts in order, know who you want to contact, so the next project you can pitch it to them again, right? So I went 1 year, 5 publishers a week, 250 publishers total, no deal at the end. It resulted in basically nothing, right? The next year, first week in January 2019, I guess it was, I sent it out to 5 publishers. I got 3 emails back right away they were interested, and then I got a bidding war between 2 of them and a book deal by the end of the first week, or the end of the first month. So I tell authors all the time is they're not necessarily turning you down, they're turning the idea down. Because I was the same guy in 2019, I was in 2018. I just came back with a much better idea that people were interested in. And then I think the other thing I get, if you said for advice, number 1, write what you know about in your experience with an eye for what will sell. So I kind of took on the endurance athlete world because number 1, I love it. I love being a part of it. I love competing and running marathons. But number 2, traditionally, endurance athlete people have discretionary income, right? They're they're independent finances. They spend money to get good at their sport, right? Someone that buys a $10,000 touring bike will probably buy a $20 book, right? And then number 2, 3, they're active on social media where publishers can see right away how many people ran the New York City Marathon, how many people did the Ironman triathlon, whatever it is, and you can quantize that market very easily. Right. So I kind of got lucky that my interest lined up with something that was very easy to explain how to be commercially successful. But just keep in mind, if you want to write a book because it's your own passion project and it's for, your followers, your fans, you should definitely do that. If you want to get with a bigger publisher and get in Barnes and Noble, think about what's going to sell. Because at the end of the day, the publishing world is a business. Even though I'm kind of new to that business, I feel like I know it a little bit. But think about what's going to sell and think about who your target market is and try to explain to a publisher that X amount of people will at least be interested in what you're doing by using metrics like social media followers, Amazon list, stuff like that to prove that there's actually interest in what you want to write about.
No, that's great advice. Congrats also, by the way. I know that's a very long, tedious process, and COVID definitely derailed it, or at least threw it off track for a bit. But
yeah, I was in a weird situation where I turned in the manuscript on January 30th, 2020. And I was like, all right, that's done. And then for the next 6 months, I had nothing to do. The book was done. My job was shut down. I was just bored for a while. I'll give you one more thing for authors, aspiring authors that listen to the show. The one mistake I kind of made with the negotiation process, it wasn't that bad. Bloomsbury's been great to work with. They're going to give you an outline of when they want parts of the book delivered, right? Rough draft this day, next round that is this day. And unfortunately, what they wanted coincided with my busiest time of the year in the weight room. It was the fall semester, right? So I was having these book meetings every week and having to go through, hundreds of pages of edits while every single team is training full bore. We're talking off-season baseball, off-season swimming, preseason both basketballs, in-season soccer and volleyball. So if you do get a chance to work with a publisher, or next time I do, I'm going to try to write in. I want to do the bulk of the work in my summer or over the holidays. The time is a little bit slower because it all worked out. But as you guys know, our job is we get paid all year, hopefully, but our job is somewhat seasonal, right? So for me, from Labor Day to Thanksgiving is a ridiculous amount of work in a ridiculously short period of time. And that one year I was trying to do the book during it. And if I could have flipped that around a little bit, I probably would have.
No, it's good advice, especially if you're interested in getting into it, because I know also anybody that is interested in doing a book like you did, where the market is bigger, kind of like you stated, it's definitely a completely different process, because anybody can go through and self-publish whatever nonsense notes document they have right now the next day. But to go through this and actually get it from like a big publishing company, it takes definitely a lot of work, and it's a business for sure.
Yeah, it's almost like the strength and conditioning business. It's my first year or two in it, I was kind of a mess, feeling my way out. Second year, I got it. Maybe third year, I got it a little bit. And now this year, this has been a fun year in it for me, doing a lot of podcasts and promo stuff, and I like that kind of stuff. And then I guess our next step is try to get ready to write something else and put something else out. But I think it's a good idea. The other thing I think too, from a kind of selfless standpoint, we have 250 student athletes at Seton Hall, right? I feel like I impact their life and teach them things and do a very good job at that job, right? But if you want to get your voice heard by more people, a book is a great way to do it. Your podcast is a great way to do it. Instagram is a great way to do it. But I feel like there's so many strength coaches that we deal with that they're great voices. They have great ideas about training. And we live in such a great time that you get that stuff out. Like you said, anybody can publish an ebook in a one push of a button. Anybody can do an Instagram post. And I feel like so much of our profession wants to hate on that kind of newer media stuff. But I always make the joke to our coaches, if you hate Instagram now, you were the person that hated books 500 years ago. You just hate the way the world's going, and I'm sorry, you're going to lose, right? But I think so many coaches should have a bigger voice, and we live in a cool time for people like you to have a megaphone and get your voice out. You message out to more people as the kids that come into your weight room. No,
it's a great point, and that's kind of piggybacking off what you said about that bubble with your resources at like Seton Hall or anywhere you're working. It's hard to be so condensed and only like visible to your student athletes and not have a voice kind of outside of it, because you want something to take you away and kind of recharge you, and be able to like project whatever thoughts you have. But on the same note, you don't also want to be so disconnected from where you're currently working, and that's all you're doing. Like you're only filming athletes, you're only doing those sort of things. You can have your foot in both doors without really overdoing it.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, one thing I've learned, and as I've gotten older, I've leaned into this a little more, because when you're young, it's easy, right? When you're 25 and the athletes are 22, living in their world is easy because you live in their world, right? When you're 40 and the athletes are 18, you got to put some effort into it, right? But you got to have the conversations they have. The joke I always make is nobody's ever called my office and said, can you please explain the sliding filament theory of muscle contraction in great detail, right? Nobody called, hey, what's popping with the Krebs cycle? Can you explain that to me? What they ask about is they ask about CrossFit. They ask about F45. They ask about, C4, whatever supplement's hot this month. So you got to live in their world a little bit and be able to speak their language. And what I would say is, once you have the base, if you know the human body, you know energy metabolism, you know caloric intake, stuff like that, I'll look at what they give me. I'll explain it as best I can. Say, this is a good product. This is a bad product. This is why you should not do CrossFit this summer, kind of thing. And I have some backup for it. But the idea of the old school strength coach that just lives in his weight room and doesn't know anything about what's outside those four walls, it's getting harder and harder to respect that person, because in your phone is every single other idea that's ever been created by humanity about the human body. And if you're not going to be open to at least listening to some of that, I don't know if you're going to be working in this profession too much longer.
Yeah, it's a good point. Obviously, like being relatable. I don't take like crazy pre-workout and stuff anymore, but I tell you, I get one from my lacrosse guys every damn week. Like,
Yeah.
What's this? I was like, bro, listen, they make there's 10 new supplement companies that just happened in the time we talked. Right. So you got to show it to me. I'll figure it out. But if you stay a little bit up to date and know what the questions are going to ask ahead of time and be like ready with an answer, it's good. You can't just say, well, back in my day, this is what I did. Or, oh yeah, well, this is what I did. No, you definitely do have to stay relatable and speak their language a little bit more.
And I'll look up any supplement that guy brings me. I'll look into anything. Number one, I want to learn about myself. Number two, I want to let him know I care about him and what he's putting in his body or her. But we don't have lacrosse at Seton Hall, but our big energy drink pre-workout team is baseball, right? They're the same thing. They're bringing me something every day or two. What do you think about this thing, whatever it is? And I'll look it up, but I tell them the same joke every time. If you're 18 and you have no mortgage, no kids, no car payment, you got maybe a girlfriend, your whole life is fire right now, right? Everything you do is lit. If you can't get excited to lift weights with your best friends at 6 a.m, maybe this whole thing ain't for you. You know what I mean?
No, that's a good point.
If you need pre-workout coursing through your veins to do a set of squats at this phase in your life, good luck being 35 or 40.
Yeah, that's that one caught up to me quick, and that's why I'm looking for any energy drink sponsors at this current moment, because mortgage is hanging over my head, and I didn't think that was going to happen for a while, but I'll take any help I can get at this point.
Yeah, man. No, I'm not saying. Somebody asked me recently, does the NIL deal in college apply to strength coaches? I'm not turning down anything. Yeah, I'll wear any T-shirt, any pullover. I'll change my Instagram handle, whatever these companies need. If you got a check, I'm doing it.
That was one of the first meetings I got when they got here. They're like, "Oh, do you think about the athletes?" And no, I'm worried about us. I was like, I need food companies. I was like, I want that fridge in our office stocked. Like, if we're going to be here for 14 hours, it's like, oh, let's cut some corners and let me save some money for us. So, hey, obviously I don't want to give away the whole book. But can you kind of give like a brief synopsis of what it is and what people can kind of expect, like when they're going to bookshelves?
Absolutely. So the book is separated into two main chapters. The first half, or two main parts, obviously several chapters every part. The first part of the book is an explanation of why endurance athletes, so mainly runners, cyclists, swimmers, and triathletes, should implement daily or weekly or at least regular resistance training, right? How getting stronger is going to help the body in those endurance events. And we kind of take the general principles of resistance training and explain them, because a lot of those people don't understand how the body works, right? So we talk about things like progressive overload, general adaptation syndrome, rest and recovery, and how to implement this. So we're assuming a lot of our readers are already training a lot, right? They're already doing a lot of miles on the bike, the run, whatever it might be. So we're acknowledging you're probably already quote unquote in shape. So you're starting to put these other components in to get around your training, right? And the thing we identified early was there's two things all endurance athletes deal with, myself included: too much fatigue and too little time, right? If you spend a lot of time doing endurance work and you have a job and you have a family and you have other responsibilities, you probably can't spend 2 hours in the gym, right? So we kind of broke everything down to about 40-minute sessions, and then managing fatigue. And the way we did that is we identified 6 foundation movements, right? And we give the readers a lot of progressions and regressions for each one. So for example, I think the barbell back squat is kind of like the benchmark for a lower extremity movement, right? But if you just ran 10 miles in the hills and it was pouring raining and you had wind resistance the whole time, maybe that day we do a leg press or a goblet squat or something else, right? Or you had a great day and you feel great, maybe you really load up that back squat, put some weight on the bar, and get stronger for next time. So the idea was that there's going to be, you're going to deal with time in the way we tell you to schedule and suggest we schedule things. And then we're going to deal with that fatigue by giving you some templates to train with, and then some progressions and regressions and ways to pick and pull each exercise to put your workouts together. So we have the 6th, and then the second half of the book is the actual training itself. And that's the 6 foundation exercise we talked about already. For us, it's going to be the squat, the lunge, the hip hinge, upper body push, upper body pull, and a hip bridge. And then we have top 10 lists for each discipline, right? So top 10 lists for runners, top 10 for cyclists, top 10 for swimmers and triathletes. And the idea is that, can a cyclist get something out of doing the swim top 10 exercises? Absolutely. But if you're pressed for time, these are 10 exercises we think you should get in every week or every 2 weeks, because these are going to get the most bang for your buck and the most efficient use of your time, right? So for example, my personal stance on this is, about 80% of what we do in a weight room can be the same for just about everybody. That top 20% should be sport specific, right? So for one example, I think an overhead press is a great exercise. I do it all the time myself. Am I going to tell a swimmer that swims 7,500 yards a day to go overhead with heavy dumbbells all the time? Probably not, right? So maybe maybe for your runner or cyclist, that kind of upper body movement might be great. But if you're crushing it in a pool, maybe not for you.
No, that's awesome. That's great to kind of hear like how it's outlined and everything. And basically here too, like you touched on all the kind of different endurance sports as well, like runner, swimmer, cyclist. Cause I think a lot of people like see running, like think of endurance sports and your first guess and like is, hey, I don't want to run, but there's
Right.
so many different options available to you. But I kind of told you before we started rolling with this that like I know a lot of strength coaches are probably in the same boat as me and probably won't admit it, but I have not worked a lot of like track and field sports. Like obviously a lot of the components that come out of track and field and like I throw, but still like once you start getting past like 400 meters into the 800s and then you start getting to like the real endurance sport athletes, like the uncertainty level that I have in programming for them is crazy. So to have like a resource like this for a book, I think is great for strength coaches because the other thing we talked about is I think a lot of the reasons that problems stem from track and field coaches and endurance coaches is that I don't know if they necessarily think strength training is important or if what my thing is, I think they think that strength coaches don't comprehend what their sport is because the majority of the time, like we said, you get into barbell sports as a strength coach. You're not a marathon runner and you're a Division I coach right away. It's kind of the opposite. And marathon running is something where like 80-year-olds are still doing. And there's not as many people still lifting as there is like running in like to older age. So from like your point of view, like does this kind of make sense with like the coaches that you've seen or work with or some of the feedback you've got from the book as well?
Yeah, definitely. I have said early on that our working with endurance athletes has been a gaping hole in our profession's knowledge for a very long time, for exactly the reasons you said, right? Most of us come out of either like a football, lacrosse, baseball background or a powerlifting, Olympic lifting background, right? That covers probably 80% of the strength coaches in the country, if not more. Almost nobody goes from the cross country team to being a strength coach. Fair. So you got that knowledge gap, and then the same thing is your track and cross country coaches may have never lifted before themselves in their life, right? If you're at this point in the game, as far as lifting's been involved in sports, if you're doing a baseball coach, a football coach, a wrestling coach, they've lifted at least some point, and now they will, in some cases, test your last nerve because they think they know more than you do, even though they may not know anything. But at least they understand the value of the big idea of strength training, right? But then you got to get into the nitty gritty of sets, reps, exercise selection, stuff like that. In the endurance world, we're dealing with coaches, sometimes high level college, world class coaches that don't see the value in resistance training whatsoever, right? And I think a lot of those coaches, and not to throw anybody under the bus, but even the ones that are winning championships and producing great athletes, you look at the health of those runners, it's not good a lot of times, man. How low is their body fat? How much disordered eating? How much faster could that guy or girl be if they had some muscle mass? And how much longer of a career could they have had, right? And one thing I'm pretty realistic about in the book and in my life in general, resistance training, if you're an endurance athlete, you're not going to see the results tomorrow, right? You don't start doing sit-ups on Friday and have a six-pack by Saturday. It's not the way it works, right? But it's that kind of chipping away at your goal and kind of building a better body over time is where it becomes valuable. And like you said, you can run marathons into your 80s and you don't have to look like the stereotypical marathon runner who's rail thin, no muscle mass, just dragging their emaciated corpse across the finish line. You can look like a strong, powerful man or woman and finish the marathon ready to run the next marathon, right? Like we love the movies and we love the highlights where the guy or girl is just completely physically, mentally, emotionally exhausted, crawling across the finish line. Well, then when the music stops and the montage stops, that guy or girl's in a hospital getting an IV for dehydration, not even thinking about training again. My thing is, let's make the highlight reel the guy or the man or woman that finishes upright, good running mechanics, good breathing patterns, finishes the finish line, gives his husband or wife a high five, and says, let's go train for the next one. And that's that lack of strength and a lack of musculature integrity is what's causing a lot of these things we're seeing in finish lines.
I think that makes it a fitting title for the book too, to actually finish strong and not be the one person that flops like right when you cross the finish line. So that's awesome. Obviously you did get your start in barbell training and everything. So that was a real cool thing because you had that background to draw upon. Like you said, if you're going to write a book or write about the things, write about your experiences, but what shifted your focus and why did you want to get involved in endurance-based sports, like after doing strength training for so long?
It was really a weird, like I said, I was writing for that magazine, Fate, New Jersey. The whole staff was going to run a 10-mile race in Philadelphia. And I liked the people. I liked the people I was working with on the magazine. I was still at Seton Hall at that time. It was like a little side job I had. And I just liked that. Oh, this will be fun. We'll run a 10-mile race. We'll get some cheesesteaks on South Street and we'll drive back to Jersey. It'll be a fun afternoon, right? And then it was a fun afternoon. But then I just kind of caught the bug. And if I could run 10, maybe I could run 13. Maybe I could run 26. And what I always tell strength coaches is, outside of my formal education and certifications, the thing I did that was the biggest eye opener as a strength coach was running that first marathon. Because now all of a sudden I understood our cross country kids, our distance swimmers. I understood all those kids so much better than I ever did before, right? And immediately when that happened, that next school year, my programming was better. My relationships with them were better. So many strength coaches hate the cross country team. Like, oh, those weird kids that come in, they wreck the weight room because their shoes are filthy from the trails. And it's like, they don't want to squat, they don't want to clean, they don't want to deadlift. But go out and run 17 miles. Tell me if you want to squat, clean, or deadlift after. You know what I mean? So I really got the better relationship with those kids and our swimmers. And I still like lifting. I still lift a couple times a week, but I'm really into the endurance side of things, and it made my programming better, and it led to this book. It's been a cool experience.
No, that's awesome. That's great advice for anybody. Obviously, it's kind of the same as the coaching experience. You're not going to probably it's not going to happen as often where the first job you have is the one that you're going to stay for the rest of your career. So the same with kind of your athletic career. Like most people are not going to you can't play football through high school, then college, then professional, and then continue to keep doing it after. You hope that the character traits and all like the benefits you got from training or that team atmosphere, that community, you're finding it in a different way when you're done with your career. And as a coach, it's cool to see people that may not dabble in like just like program hop or like sport hop back and forth, but that evolve and start to build their toolbox a little bit more by, hey, now I know the endurance-based sports a little bit more because, just do 1 5K and see what happens.
Yeah. What I think too, I think there's a fine line between, like, I think there's a good term for that, like program hop. People are just like, I'm doing CrossFit this month, I'm doing F45 next month, then I'm going to Orange Theory Fitness. That's not good for anybody. We could agree on that, right? But I do think the idea of being open-minded and trying some new things as a strength coach is a good idea. And just general population people. I deal with so many people that say, I don't like to work out. Well, what workout did you do? I did a Zumba class, whatever it might be. Well, no, you didn't like that workout. There's 1,000 other workouts you might like if you try it, right? And then the strength coaches I find sometimes we'll get burnt out and bored because we're spending all day in the weight room, then training ourselves, which are two things we started out loving. But then when you do it for 100 hours a week for 52 weeks a year, people get like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done training. I want to get out of the profession. But I think trying different things and try, if nothing else, try what you're going to prescribe to your athletes, right? Like this entire spring semester, we had a volleyball coaching change, right? So I had no coach input whatsoever, and there was no volleyball being played. So I wrote the best volleyball workouts I could, like a lot of contrast training, a lot of decent amount of Olympic stuff, some box jumps, and I'm like, I'm just do that for the spring. That's my program for 3 months. I'm going to do it at noon, at lunchtime. They're going to come in at 2:30 and do it. And if I got to make a bit, like one day I put something together, it took me like an hour and a half to do it. And I'm like, it's going to take them 2 hours to do it. There's no way this is going to work. I wouldn't have known that if I didn't try it myself first. I usually do the baseball workouts in the fall when those guys are kind of training a lot. You get 4 days a weekend. But I think you got to have, if you train 12 teams, you can't do 12 workouts a day. But trying at least some of them, I think, is a good start to being able to implement them and see how they flow and seeing what these kids' bodies are going through, after their training.
No, that's great advice. Obviously, like if you get started right away too, if you do your own program for a sport for a semester, you got a pretty good idea of what it's going to intake and what like the time commitment, like what you won't really know what an athlete feels like coming from practice or off a game necessarily, but that's where like your knowledge of like anatomy and physiology and like your coaching eye and kind of that intuition feeling, that's really what's going to put the tweaks on it. That's where the art comes in.
One thing I'll say about that too, one thing is I've gotten, this is probably advice for young coaches, you know what I mean? I always say, particularly in season, but sometimes out of season tour groups, pick a couple people that you could trust on the team. and ask them how the team's feeling, right? Because there's some people that when you ask them how they feel, it's always going to be, I feel terrible, I'm sore, I'm dehydrated, I hate my life, I don't want to do anything in the weight room, right? And there's some people that are always like, I feel great, let's go, give me more reps, give me heavier med balls. You got to find some people in the middle that'll tell you the truth and kind of take the pulse of the team with them. You guys had a late flight last night, long game, whatever. How are we feeling? We're sore. All right, we're going to spend some more time on a warm-up, foam roll, maybe cut a set out of something, right? If they say, hey, it was a long night, we all feel pretty good, let's roll. Now we're going to maybe do the extra set and superset some stuff, whatever it might be. But I think particularly in season, you got to be flexible, and you got to have a couple players on every team that you ask them, ask them for the pulse of the team and respect what they tell you. And, sometimes you got to say, sorry, you guys are beat up, but we got to get this good day in today because the rest of the way the week's going to be. Or we could say, all right, let's take our foot off the gas. The Wednesday's game is important. Let's do a real long warm-up, couple good sets, and I'll let you out of here kind of thing.
Yeah, but I think too, to your point, if you explain it to those ones that you're regularly bringing in and you're asking for their advice, and they understand like, hey, this one is important, we have to get it in. I know, like, hey, we played 17 innings last night, but
Right.
Listen, like this weekend series is important. We have to get this in. We'll make some adjustments as we can, and we'll add some more recovery after practice, but they'll understand because you're not just kind of sticking to the script. And at the same time, you're not also taking everything they say for face value. I know that I've tried to do that. And oftentimes you got to be very careful who you trust in there. Because if you talk to the freaks, you talk to that All-American who his tank is different than everyone else, you're going to get a very skewed difference of opinions from that guy versus like, hey, what's really the average of the team, and not the guy that's lazy and doesn't want to do anything too. You got to find somewhere in the middle where the rest of the team is actually filling it in.
Right. It's like picking a player to lead the warm-ups one day. You got to pick the right player.
especially if it's an important day. If it's a little bit slower day, you can pick one of the stragglers that usually hides in the back.
Yeah, what I do, I try to do that too. My goal is to have the stragglers and the freshmen that are quiet eventually being leaders, at least during, like if you can't tell your teammates do 20 jumping jacks, what are you doing? So just kind of get them project their voice and, picking the right days to pull those kids that might not be natural leaders out, they bring their voice out a little bit. And then the big days, your seniors or the captains got to step up and make it happen.
Great point. Yeah. I know when we talked about like the barbell training and just like being in the weight room all the time, that's definitely one thing that I felt like for strength training and like competing in strongman and just being in the weight room all the time. I remember going to compete against guys, and I've had this conversation. It wasn't like an excuse, but they're like, oh man, it must be so nice to be in the weight room all day. Like you got all the equipment, you could train whenever you want. I was like, you guys do not know what my job is. Like I'm on my feet. I don't want to look at how many steps I took. And then I want to get purposeful training somewhere squeezed in there. And I know that a coach is going to bother me. I've got to have athletic trainers come in. I got a makeup group. It's like, I don't lift. I try not to lift at school. And then I started getting involved in Highland games more because I was like, I want to do something different and be outside. I want to get away. And I think endurance sports is probably, for anybody that wants to like dabble in that, that's a great way to kind of get away from the weight room a little bit, still be able to keep your foot in there, but get some sun, get out on the road, do something different.
Yeah, and I always make this joke, man. I deal with so many kids that tell me they hate running, and they're college athletes or college kids in my classes. And I'm like, you hate running in direct correlation to how great the rest of your life is, right? Like if you're playing Big East basketball in front of 20,000 people at the Prudential Center and everybody knows your name and you're on billboards and you're doing commercial, turning down NLI deals, your life is so lit. Going for a 5-mile run is like the worst thing you could ever think of, right? I tell you, be 40, have a family, have a mortgage, be in the weight room 12 hours a day, have kids at home, and that run is the best thing you're doing that day.
That's a good point. Hey, so with all the resources that you have available, both at Seton Hall and just like the network that you've created, I mean, former athletes, former interns, like the group me messages and stuff, there's a lot of opportunities for you and like to get on shows or get on podcasts or like write books and read stuff as well. How do you kind of filter all those things? Because I know you're someone that is constantly looking for new information and challenging yourself, but there's a lot of information out there. So more so than rather than like, where do you go for that knowledge? How do you filter what's important to kind of do,
Okay.
because your time is valuable.
Yeah. All of our time is valuable, man. So what I always say is I try to, if something's brought to me by someone I respect, I'll give it a second take. So for example, we have an athletic trainer at Seton Hall that she's great at her job and she teaches a class, and she brought in somebody 2 weeks ago to talk to her class about animal flow. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, a little
Okay.
bit.
Yeah, and I was very vaguely familiar before. So then I watched the instructor talk to her students. I was like, okay, that's cool. I want to go down that rabbit hole. But I had just come across animal flow on Instagram or TikTok, I'd probably be like, this looks silly, right? But because somebody I respect brought it to me, I was like, oh, let me take a look at that. And actually, kind of cool stuff we might use a little bit this summer. So I think try to have your little inner circle of people you respect, and then kind of trade ideas with them. I saw this thing online. What do you guys think about it? And maybe if they think it's a great thing, maybe everybody kind of takes a look at it. But I say try to have a little bit of a filter, and then just keep in mind how the body works and be able to pick a gimmick out when you see it. But we live in a weird time. There's a lot of bad stuff out there, but there's also a lot of good stuff out there, right? So if somebody I respect says, have you heard of this thing? I'll go in that rabbit hole a little bit and see what I thought of it, because there's just so much coming out every day. It's just almost impossible to keep up with.
No, it's a great way to do it. I think using those resources that you have, because you've got a rapport with them, and they're probably doing the same thing too, using their resources and then filtering that information. So if they bring you something,
the other thing, real
I'm
quick,
gonna
too,
listen.
when you have that inner circle, sometimes you might look at a product or a book or whatever, like, oh, that's ridiculous. And they go, well, did you ever think about using it this way? And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's another way to implement that I hadn't thought of. And that's why I said before we got on the air, we're trying to implement some new technology and stuff in the department this summer. And we're all of our sports medicine staff, all of our strength staff is going to these meetings, right? And these proposals from the companies. And when they're leaving, we're having conversations where I think I'm a pretty bright guy and know a decent amount about how things work. But other coaches and other athletic trainers, well, what if we used it like this? Or what if we implemented it every 2 months instead of every week, whatever it is? And that's super valuable, man. So keeping yourself around good people that keep you sharp and view the world differently than you do is super valuable to me.
Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah, it's the same thing, because like we talked about like getting some technology in and similar products as well, and using like going together with different parts of different like departments in the athletic staff to actually kind of get their idea and see their perspective of how it will be used or where it's going to go. And then reaching out to other places that like within your network that you trust, be like, hey, is this actually worthwhile? Like, does this actually make sense? And I think those products a lot of times now are getting better because they're former like strength coaches, athletic trainers that are in our position. So they pitch it really good, but at the end of the day, they're still trying to sell something to you.
Yeah, oh, no question. But don't you think that the best equipment reps, the best technology are guys or women that were in this field before and can tell you, like, here's the company line on this, here's the way you should really be, or here's one way you can actually implement this that we're not putting on the website or something like that, where this is where this really becomes valuable because they know the way the strength and conditioning world works, and they can show you why this rack might be better than that rack, or what this camera does that that camera doesn't do, that somebody who's just a salesman or woman or just a tech person wouldn't know.
Yeah, I agree. Those people are super helpful because they know what your job entails already. They've been in your position before. I worked with VX Sport before. Steve Gisselman was a former like UNC assistant coach for like, I want to say almost 12 years. And when I was getting the GPS going, like at my first job at Loyola, like full-time job, I had no idea what I was doing. And he sat down and went through everything with me, showed me how to make pivot charts and stuff like that. When I spent the whole summer trying to create stuff and the Excel file was corrupted and I threw my computer, he helped me out, and he knew exactly what I was going through because he had done it all before. And like people like that in those positions are super helpful. And those are great resources because they know what you've been through. So to kind of help you avoid some of the shortcomings and some of those easy mistakes and kind of guide you a little bit without holding your hand through the process, that saves you so much time and that takes the profession in a step forward. And that kind of leads me to the question I wanted to ask you, because obviously you've been in a place for a while and without staying in a place for a long time, you don't really get an opportunity because you're always moving to see how the profession is advancing and how it's changing, because it's changed obviously your role and your responsibilities and just your department at Seton Hall. So where do you think like strength conditioning profession is like headed, and what do you think right now we're really doing well that we could probably grip onto and continue to see it into the future?
Cool. I'll start with where we are right now. I think we're doing a better job than ever before of putting together the traditional ideas of how to get strong, right? I think when I first got in the profession, it was everything about record boards and how many guys on your team could bench press 225 and that kind of thing, with very little eye towards does that translate into a game, right? We saw weight room all-stars that were not the best players for a very long time. Now we still see that sometimes, but then it went super the other way. Everything's got to be functional and movement based, and a bench press is useless, but a reverse dumbbell bench press on a physio ball with no shoes on was the way to go, right? And then they got away from getting strong. I think where we are right now is a pretty solid spot of the squat rack and the platform are important, right? But the dynamic warm up and the mobility work and the flexibility and stuff is also very important, right? So I think we're in a good middle ground there. Where I see us going in the future is kind of using technology to track our progress in both of those things, right? So I think something like the functional movement screen and then commercial movement screens out there, as far as being able to quantify your results as a strength coach and prove to your coach and your administration that you're accomplishing something every day in the weight room is going to continue to be super important. More ways to do it now than ever. And then kind of that melding of the rack and the platform with the movement and the flexibility and mobility that will hopefully help that transfer out into the field is kind of where it's going to continue to go. And the men and women that meld the two of those things together and find ways to quantify their results will continue to kind of raise to the top of our profession.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's great advice. And that's kind of, it's cool to see where other people think that the profession's going and what we've been doing well. And oftentimes it's like you said, it's kind of a big overcorrection from what has been going for a while. It's the same as fads. When something kicks off for a while, it's short burn, and then someone's looking for something in the complete opposite direction of where we're going to go.
Yeah, I always say, man, in the 90s, we were in crazy baggy jeans. Then in the 2000s, we were in skinny jeans. And now we're back to people wearing like kind of regular fitting jeans. But I'm sure the next decade it'll do something crazy with the jeans again. But just kind of the pendulum swings, the opposite direction.
Oh yeah, history's bound to repeat itself in some way, and what's old is new again for sure. Do you have any competitions or any marathons coming up?
I have a 5-mile race Memorial Day, kind of kick off the Jersey Shore, more like a family fun run type thing. And then because of COVID, the New Jersey Marathon is kind of on hold right now. They're going to bring it back in 2023. So I've run 3 marathons. My goal was to run the New Jersey Marathon the year COVID shut it down, qualify for Boston, run Boston, and kind of make that. I run 5 marathons. Boston would be a good bucket list race and kind of wrap it up, right? But the world is not cooperating with that. So hopefully whatever race I run next is a qualifier for Boston. I get in Boston, and that'll be kind of my 5th marathon, and we'll go from there. And I do a bunch of smaller things that are more really for fun than anything super competitive.
Gotcha. Yeah, because we talked about, like when you said from the book too, like some of the 2 like big things that are pitfalls obviously is fatigue. And that's coming with strength coaches too. If some of the unmanageable stuff or like family life and just hours, all those things, that's going to add up on you. But time commitment's one too. Like unless you're going to wake up at 3 a.m. and run for 2 hours, shower quick and get ready for a 6 a.m. lift, like time commitment's pretty hard too. Like how are you able, obviously there's a lot of things in the book. I don't want you to give all that away, but you personally, since most people aren't strength coaches training for marathons and long distance events, how do you kind of like balance those time things or fatigue?
Right. What I normally think about is we periodize our training programs for our athletes, right? I kind of periodize my life. So if it's the spring and summer, I can train and run a marathon pretty good, right? I know I can't do it in the fall. There's just no way I could do that, right? So I kind of look at my training and my year. I know what my year is at this point. So like during the fall, I know I could get a lift in between teams almost every day. So I try to get as big and strong as I can in the fall, right? Then as the holidays hit, I got some more time. I'll mix in some more like CrossFit, metabolic conditioning type stuff. And then as we get to the spring, now my schedule opens up and I can get a break in between 2 groups and go for a 10-mile run maybe, or get up early on a weekend and get it in. And then my summer is challenging, but not that packed as the fall is, so I could do some races during then too. But then it's kind of the bigger thing is kind of look at your life the way you look at your athlete's life and plug in your training and competing around your job and your other responsibilities. And that's a decent way to do it, right? Your plate is only so big, you can't keep putting more stuff on it. Eventually you got to take something off it, or at least move it to another plate for right now.
I love it. That's awesome. That's figuring out ways around your schedule and kind of making it work for you. That's the best way to do it. So, hey, like any good training session, we're not doing long distance stuff. Obviously, I'm not used to that very much yet, but we end the show with a good finisher. So we got 4 quarters, 4 questions, and then a finish line right into overtime. But you can answer them as quick as you want, or we can drag it out and you can elaborate on whatever it is. But you ready?
Let's go.
All right, first one I got for you. Biggest influence in the strength and conditioning profession and biggest influence in sports in general. We'll go since you've done so many.
Okay. In strength and conditioning, I think it would be a mixture of the mentors I brought up already that I got to meet personally and work with, right? And then there's a book called Getting Stronger by Bill Pearl, who was he was Mr. Olympia a bunch of times before Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Kind of like the Arnold before Arnold kind of guy. And he wrote a book. It came out in probably the 80s. I read it in the 90s. I want to get involved in my profession. I checked out our public library. I read it cover to cover. It's obviously dated information, but as far as a book that kind of got the ball rolling on what I've done in my life, it's probably Getting Stronger by Bill Pearl. Outside sports in general, I guess just based on the amount of money I've spent on sneakers, I got to say Michael Jordan. I'd live in a better house right now if I didn't blow so much money on Jordans in my life. But I think even though the Last Dance didn't paint him in the best light, I think what he did on the court, as far as dominating a team sport and just that crazy drive to win, is something we could all learn a little bit from.
I like it. Hey, so when you're not writing, hanging out with the family, running, all the other things you got to go teaching, what are you doing when it's not in the walls of the weight room? What are some of your hobbies outside of all that?
All right, man. I got a Nintendo Switch that I quote unquote bought for my daughter, but I play 10 times more than she does. So you might find me playing Mario and Zelda games, even though I'm a grown man. I got pretty into that the last couple of years. And then just kind of normal stuff, man. I like hanging out, taking care of my yard, and it's kind of that kind of stuff. Nothing too crazy.
Okay. Hey, so if you don't think you would have ever got started in coaching, what do you think your profession would be like right now to date? And if you could go pro in any sport in the world, what would that be?
Okay. I think if I wouldn't have been a coach, I think maybe a teacher of some kind, right? Or maybe something involved in the business side of sports, like maybe in the sneaker world or the AD side of things, or even the promoting and marketing side of things. I find that world very interesting. We'll have a game and it's packed, and we'll have another game and it's not very well attended. And I kind of be curious to find out why that happens and what variables affect that. So maybe like marketing or that kind of thing, PR, that kind of thing, possibly that. And then the second question was
pro sports. If you could be pro in anything.
I don't know. My favorite sport to watch is hockey, right? But that is a brutal lifestyle to go through. So I'll say maybe I'd like to play frontline center for the New York Islanders, or maybe like a relief pitcher for the starting pitcher for the Yankees, and just work every fifth day, take the 4 days off in between.
Okay, that's what I was trying to figure out if you were going to be an Islanders fan or a Devils fan.
No, for me it's the Islanders, but I'm a Jersey guy through and through.
Gotcha. Hey, so this is different probably. Well, we'll go for marathon training, or you can go for like strength training. But what is kind of the music you listen to, if at all, and then post-training meal on your ideal training day?
Okay, I can go a couple ways on the training, right? On the music, right? I'm a Jersey guy. I'm Italian, so it could be some techno, some EDM, kind of just spaced out from what I'm doing, right? If I'm lifting and the players are in the weight room with me, like the room's open and I'm in a lifting, it's going to be some Drake, some Migos, some Juice WRLD, some stuff they like, right? And if the room's closed, it's just me, probably some Jay-Z or DMX or late 90s, early 2000s hip hop. And my post workout meal, if I'm trying to kind of feed the machine and keep getting better, maybe sushi, maybe fish, maybe some grilled meat on the grill, some chicken turkey burger, something like that. If it's kind of like I ran a marathon post-race celebration meal, definitely pizza.
Okay. All right. So the last one I got for you for the finish line, our overtime. What is either your favorite under the bar memory or favorite coaching memory of all time?
Okay. Under the bar, I have a bunch of, I've said PRs in the weight room, kind of like everybody else has. That meant a lot to me, but probably not a lot to anybody else. But coaching wise, I got a pretty good one, man. About 10 years ago, the high school strength coach I referenced earlier, Ron DeVito, was retiring from a 40-year career in teaching, right? So we have a minor league baseball team called the Jersey Shore Blue Claws, and they do a great job they're a good team, but they do a great job at everything around the game, like fireworks, stuff for kids, Thirsty Thursdays. It's like a great night, and tickets are super cheap. So his family rented out a suite area for his retirement party, right? So, and he was a teacher for 40 years. So there were kids there who had like literally just graduated high school, to people in their 50s that had this guy influenced, right? And all of my best friends were there watching the game. And through some incredible stroke of luck, one of my favorite athletes I ever got the opportunity to work with at Seton Hall got called up to AA that week and was a starting pitcher in the game, right? So I'm at a game with the guy that got me in the industry, all of my best friends. The pitcher for our team was a guy I was lucky enough to train, and he was a weight room rock star at Seton Hall, right? He gets the win, he wins the game, and at the end of the game, fireworks come on, and the DJ throws on "The Boys Are Back in Town." And legit, I'll tell your listeners, I just started crying, man. I haven't cried in like 10 years, and I just lost it. Like, this is the best thing ever. This is why you get involved in coaching and strength and conditioning. And it was a great night, man. And that's one of those like just kind of the universal lines, and everything hits you at the same time. And it was like 3 generations of strength coaches all in one place. And it was probably my favorite moment of coaching ever.
Man, that's a roll the credits, end of the movies type of deal right there. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really something else.
Man, that's great to see, though, someone that's impacted you and influenced you for so long, and then to kind of see the longevity of it. And I hope you explained to him like the impact of what that pitcher was, and because now you can see after 40 years, his impact is influencing someone that he's never even probably met before.
Yeah, it's the butterfly effect. And for whatever reason, all the ripples ended up at that minor league baseball game that night.
That's awesome. Hey, so Coach, I know you're very busy. You got a lot of stuff going on, but if anybody's got any questions for you, anybody's in the Seton Hall area, how can they get a hold of you? How can they get their hands on the book and dive into this stuff deep?
Perfect. If you want to reach out, which I'm open to any questions you have, want to meet up, check out our facility, whatever it is, the best email for me is angelo.gingerelli@gmail.com. I check it all the time. And on Instagram, you can find us at finish_strong_book. We post a ton of stuff. Like, obviously, I'll post them on this podcast. We try to get a lot of good info out there too, and not make it just commercial after commercial. So at finish_strong_book. And then if you're in the area or want to go on Seton Hall's website, come and check out what we're doing up here. You guys are always welcome. Thank you for your time, man.
Hey, I appreciate you coming on. It's been awesome to talk to you. And I know you got to do a lot of things today, but picking your brain a little bit more, getting the chance to hear about the book, all the stuff that you got going on. I can't thank you enough for coming on today.
Hey, man, this was awesome. Best of luck with the show, and I'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate it, Coach. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com. where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength